So let's talk a little bit about, there are a couple of issues that we should visit a little bit about here. One is the bonding. This is a bonding year, so there's going to be some discussion of bonding. We also had an interesting philosophical question from a viewer in western Minnesota that I think kind of ties into the bonding question. I'm just going to read the question. I don't know that there's any clear immediate answer to it, but I think it reflects a point of view that maybe the panel could take a minute to comment on in the context of the bonding bill, because I think that's where it fits. This viewer says the viewer is very complimentary about our discussion about public issues here, but then notes, at what point, what about people on the eastern side of the state, say west of Hutchinson to the South Dakota border? We don't see as many big money projects that the metro to the Wisconsin border gets. This viewer thinks that maybe particular parts of the state are seen as ghost areas and maybe don't get as much attention as they should. I'm not here to endorse or to criticize that view, but I think it is a point of view held by some people. And so let's talk a little bit about what you see in this bonding year and what your observations would be about this viewer's concern. Maybe we'll start with you, Representative Christensen, as the closest thing we have to an urban member tonight.
I think our priorities for the bonding bill need to be directing money towards transportation, towards roads and bridges, and then preserving our existing buildings, our state-owned buildings and properties. I think rightfully so. I think people have concerns that the legislature in St. Paul is leaving some areas of Minnesota behind. Frankly, I think that was a big issue in the last election year in 2014. Was people felt that not all areas of the state were being treated equally, and I think that's something that I've talked about and something that frankly I understand. My dad's family comes from Tracy in southwestern Minnesota. My mom's from Wilmer by Senator Coonan in Clara City. And when I go out to these communities, people feel like they're being left behind and in favor for oftentimes they talk about Minneapolis and St. Paul being put before greater Minnesota, and I think that's a real issue. And I don't think people aren't imagining it. I think it's a real problem and we need to make sure that we're doing things and finding solutions that work for all Minnesotans.
Clara City having been invoked, Representative Coonan, let's turn to you. What do you think?
I understand where he's coming from. There is a lot of that feeling out there that the rural Minnesota has been left out or doesn't get the fair treatment. And in some cases that's probably true, but you made reference to the bonding bill. Mm-hmm. Let's say some of the environmental issues, most of the environment's outside the metro area, so a lot of money ends up in rural Minnesota in those cases. If you look at things like services, then if the money gets divided on a population basis, depending upon what services that they're talking about, but if it's divided on a population basis, you go out to western Minnesota where the population is pretty small, there's not a lot of money and there's a lot of ground to cover. So it's so much of that then that money gets used up in what would you call trying to provide the service, not actually the money hitting the ground where it's needed. And so, it depends upon how you look at it. With transportation too, there's always this comparison, who's getting the better deal and where the most money, or who's getting the most of our transportation dollars. If you divide it on a per person basis, we're doing pretty good in rural Minnesota because we have a lot of miles per person. But in the metro area, of course, they're dealing with congestion, and that's an issue too. And let's face it, I've driven down here enough to know that when I'm coming in on 394 and 494, I know which lane to get in to avoid the bad potholes, So there's issues.
Would you let us know what lane that is? Yeah. Some of us have trouble figuring that out.
Yeah, you got to learn to dodge around some, but yes. So, and I can tell you, too, that there are legislators from the metropolitan area and even the cities that think just the opposite is true, that they're not getting anything, all the money's going out into rural Minnesota. So that debate, I'm sure, will go on and on and on. But I think here in the legislature, overall, there's a tendency to try and treat everybody as fairly as possible. Now, a lot of that's in the eye of the beholder, what's fair. But I think that generally speaking, there is that effort here to try and recognize we're one state and that whatever we do for budget or policy, we should try and, the goal is to try and treat everybody as fairly as possible.
You've heard these discussions, Representative Marquardt. You've been here a long time. What do you think?
Well, if we do the governor's $1.4 billion bonding bill, we're going to get that to every area of the state, Representative Christensen. You're not going to have to worry about that. Just support the $1.4 billion. And so, and that'll be some of the debate is how big will that bonding bill do. I have always favored larger bonding bills, and the interest rates are still low. Bids come in relatively low, and it's all things that go to long-term infrastructure. You mentioned roads, and it's colleges, and in my neck of the woods, it was flood relief for many years. All the communities now, for the most part, up and down the Red River Valley, there's a few little pockets yet, are protected, and that wasn't the case 20 years ago. But that is the best example of government working. Solving these long-term infrastructure and things that you have that really make a difference in people's lives. So I'm hoping we. I don't know if we'll get to $1.4 billion. I think everyone's been talking about a fairly larger one, but I hope we get closer to $1.4 billion than less than that. If we do that, I think we're going to solve a lot of the areas, especially in some of these wastewater. The governor has, what you said, $160–70 million. I think that's important.
Well, and I think, just to be clear, and we talk about bonding, but a lot of people don't realize we're talking about borrowing money. It's the way the state borrows money to pay for projects that are, capital intensive and have a long shelf life, if you will. And it's an important function of state government. It's part of our constitutional mandate. But we say that they have to be of statewide or regional significance. And that's where we kind of get into the debate. Do the things that we're talking about, do they meet that criteria? And you're right, it's a matter of judgment. So the governor, he's proposed 1.4, and I think we've got a list now of projects. It's about almost $4 billion, I think, $3.5–4 billion. And so there's a lot of good things that people want to do. But I think that not all of them should be done by the state. And so that's where you have to decide, is this something that should be done locally, or regionally, or by the state? We've already got a backlog, frankly, of I think it's $1.2 billion of projects that we have authorized that the bonds haven't been let because we haven't got the local match or for whatever other reason. So I think we ought to be a little cautious about doubling the size of that queue, if you will, by putting another $1.4 billion. I do think that we have an obligation to make sure that our infrastructure that we've committed to is maintained. But the real challenge is, are we doing things that really meet that broad criteria? I met with a group today that was advocating for some kind of a center in Minneapolis that was kind of a cultural center, and good thing, I'm sure, but you kind of wondered, is that something that the state taxpayers should be on the hook for the next 20 years to fund? But the question about whether this is a fair balance between outstate and the metro area, I really don't know. I've not really looked at that. I know in my district, I don't think we've had really much of any bonding. We've got a community college that's, I think, has gotten some money there, but other than that, I don't think we really have got much in our district. So.
I suppose the viewer's question would also include highways and things like
highways,
that.
Highways, maybe, we've had some highway stuff, but I think if you talk to the legislature and said, if we have a bonding bill that does a lot for transportation, people would agree to that. A lot for supporting some of the higher education institutions, there'd be broad support for that. So I think, to me, the challenge will be, can we find something that there will be broad agreement on? We're going to have to get the minorities on both sides to buy into this, because we're going to need to get support votes from minority parties in both the House and the Senate.
Because there's a 60% vote
high
requirement.
threshold, a higher threshold to borrow the money. So I hope that gets us to a product at the end of the day that we can all agree is a good thing for the state.
Representative Christensen, your thoughts? Anything else on that?
Yeah, so I think that's, there's been a lot of really good points, brought up, and, I do think we need to be conscious and understanding that we are borrowing money, and that money does have to be paid back, and it does affect budgets. Like Representative Marquardt said earlier tonight, we need to be conscious in how this affects budgets down the road, not just our current budget. And I think we need to be thinking about that. But like Senator Hand said, if we're focusing on things that there's broad support for, roads and bridges, maintaining our current infrastructure, our current assets, I think that's something that could have broad support.